Well, first of all, my name is Liz Kerins. I'm the Director of Research with Early Childhood Ireland, and I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's joint seminar with our friends in the Froebel Department of Primary and Early Childhood Education at Maynooth University, and a happy Women's Day to everybody here. Early Childhood Ireland and the Froebel Department have a long and valued relationship and partnership in the development and delivery of a BA in Early Childhood Teaching and Learning. And now also from September 2022, we will be delivering a new flexible BA in Early Childhood Education and Care aimed at and designed for professionals working in settings. So we're delighted to have jointly hosted events in the past in relation to outdoor play and learning outdoors. And we would like to continue to bring new and fresh thinking to the sector in this area for practice and for policy. And we'd also like to continue to bring a strong focus in the initial professional education of our educators and our teachers in relation to outdoor play. So tonight we bring you Professor Helen Bilton. And Helen Bilton, we were just saying earlier on, has one of the best job titles in the world. She's the Professor of Outdoor Learning and Play in the University of Reading, and I know that she's very, very well known to many of you already. Helen trained as a nursery teacher and for the last 42 years, she tells us, has been researching, teaching and disseminating about outdoor teaching and learning environments for children. She has a local, national and international reputation through her many publications, brings theory and practice together in effective research-based texts, both for researchers and for practitioners. She firmly believes in the holistic nature of education, so she's in very good company tonight. And she also believes in that early education is the foundation for future success. So we're very delighted that she's here with us tonight. And we know that Ireland is on a positive journey in terms of outdoor play for learning in early childhood education and care settings, and that there's a huge appetite amongst early years educators and providers to improve their practice and to develop their outdoor environments. And policymakers are tuned into us more than maybe they were previously prior to COVID. We've had a huge response to the seminar. You can see that we have about 300 participants, 300 attendees tonight. We have many more that have also registered. We have also tonight, responding to Professor Bilton tonight, we have Dr. Jacqueline Fallon from the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, and we'd really like to thank her as well for coming along of a Tuesday evening. Jacqueline will respond to Helen's presentation. As you know, ASHTR, the Ireland's Early Childhood Curriculum Framework, is currently being reviewed, and Jacqueline leads on the review of the framework, and many of you, I'm sure, are participating if you haven't already participated in various consultation processes for the ASHTR review. So we look forward to hearing how ASHTR can continue to frame professional practice so that children can grow to be confident and competent learners through their engagement with high quality outdoor settings. So I suppose the way tonight is going to run is that Helen's going to kick off for me now for about half an hour. And then Jacqueline will come in for about 10 minutes with her response. At around 7:45, we're going to take about 10 minutes of questions and answers from Helen and from Jacqueline. And I'm really sorry, we're all sorry that it's really only 10 minutes because we know that there's a lot of wisdom and expertise and knowledge in this virtual space at the moment. The questions will be put through the chat function. So I'll keep an eye on that chat. And we also want to let you know that we will get you out the door firmly at 8 o'clock. After the Q&A, Professor Niamh Fortune is also here from Maynooth University, from the Froebel Department there, will send us off with some of her closing remarks based on what she's heard this evening. And you will also see here someone that I want to give a very, very warm note of thanks to, which is Dr. Lee O'Toole from the Froebel Department in Maynooth. And we work together very frequently. You'd never guess we were from two different institutions. So we really want to thank Leah for co-organising this event with us. And one last couple of thank yous, and I'm always slightly wary saying thank you to anybody in case I miss loads of people, but just first of all to thank Early Childhood Ireland's Research Support Officer Niamh Horgan, who's put a lot of work into organising tonight. Also like to thank Elaine and Anna in the Early Childhood Ireland comms team who have given us great support. And also Claire from Early Childhood Ireland's policy team is on the Twitter machine at the moment. If you want to put anything onto Twitter, we have a hashtag for tonight. It's hashtag Quality for Children. So that's the hashtag tonight if you do want to tweet. We are recording, as you can see, tonight. We know that everybody couldn't make it, although we've had a very good attendance rate. So that's great. So there will be a video available from tonight afterwards. So we will send that out to all of those who are registered. So I'd like to hand you over to Helen Bilton. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, right. Can I just check you can see that? Great.
Yep.
Thanks very much. So thanks very much for inviting me. I do have 40 slides. Do not panic. I will not go over the 25-2 mark. Just reassurance, kind of like, why on earth should I listen to that old woman? Whatever I say, I've either done it, I've seen other people do it and they've told me about it, or I've done it with other people, and I'm constantly working with schools. So for example, tomorrow I'm going to a school over in Hungerford to see what they're up to. So hopefully that kind of reassures you that I know what I'm talking about, but the knowledge is based on just so many people sharing with me. And I am so proud to be a nursery teacher. I was trained to be a nursery teacher, and I was trained by somebody who was an expert in outdoor education. So I feel so blessed. My main area is 3 to 8. I've got to know much more about the under 3s, particularly with a project in Portugal that I'll talk to you about. And then I've done more work 8 to 11 and actually secondary. So hopefully that kind of reassures you. So what I'm going to do is talk about the fundamentals for developing high quality, effective outdoor learning environments. I'm going to start with that. Then I'm going to do some myth busting, and then I'm going to go back to this. So all of these images, I would say, are not conducive to quality outdoor education. And as I've written, they create division, they create inequality, and they create exclusion. If you have some of those pieces of equipment, I'm not having a go at you, but what I'm saying is there may be a better way. So looking at the fundamentals to do with outdoor education, I think people can overcomplicate it. It is just a space outside. It isn't inside, it's outdoors. You have a training about educating children. Use that training for teaching children outside. I think it's terribly important to get children out every day. If you don't, you end up with children who never get to know the space, and so they never behave as you want them to. All of these things I will illustrate through pictures. So third point, have lots of loose parts, don't have fixed equipment, don't have drive-ons, as I call them, don't have fixed climbing frames and things like that. Get the right clothing. I'm not asking people to go out in every single weather, but everybody needs to be kitted up in the right clothing. You're not going to look pretty. I don't look pretty with a bobble hat, gloves, great big coat, waterproof trousers, but I am warm. I think believe in yourself. There seems to be this myth going around you might need a qualification for outside. I think it's crazy. You do not need a qualification for working outside. You don't need a qualification for inside teaching. You just have a qualification. Help parents see the benefits. That's a lot of work. and again, I'll talk about that in a minute, but they really need to understand what you're trying to achieve when you work outside and use the right language. And again, I'll talk about that in a minute. And then link everything you do to child development. So a little bit of myth busting. And I can't see the clock on here, so I'm just going to check my, right, okay. So children must not be allowed to make mistakes. Designers and inventors say learning and improving is about making and learning mistakes. So these are people who design things, who invent things. They say it's important to take risks. You need to have a willingness to innovate. There should be an experimental attitude. Failure is okay. And somebody like Dyson, you may or may not like his vacuum cleaners, but he made 526 prototypes before he got what he wanted. And he said, you need to learn from failure. And then finally, there's a company in India that says Dare to Try award. So you can have the failing idea, but you get an award for it. So mistakes are okay. We learn from them. Another myth, young children cannot focus on the same activity for a long period of time. They can. These children are in Portugal. They are between 14 months and 20 months. So they're not long after learning to walk. And in this school, they've got a massive great water butt, and children spend an inordinate amount of time transporting, which is an incredibly important schema for children, transporting water. It is as simple as that. Like I said, don't overcomplicate it. Lots of loose parts, lots of containers, lots of jugs, lots of, funnels, things like that. So yes, they can concentrate if you give them something interesting to do. So there's 3 of them getting the water themselves. Here's a chap. Look at his skill at that age with that container and one hand. And here 2 of them are helping each other. All this idea that under 2s can't cooperate is just wrong. They can, as long as we give them the right environment. Children can't appreciate the beauty of the world. I'm sorry, they can, given the right environment. And being able to understand the awe and wonder of outdoors and knowing when you can pick a strawberry and when you can't pick something. And that's about being taught. Children need controlling all the time. They don't. These are children looking, again, these very young children, while she is doing actually an autopsy on a bird that fell out of the nest and died. It was a nest they were watching. These children are not being silly. They don't need controlling. They're fascinated by what she is doing and understanding the body of a bird. Children are vulnerable and must be wrapped up in cotton wool. Your view of the child will impact how you behave with them. So do you see them as competent or vulnerable? And I'm just going to talk through these 2 pictures for a couple of minutes. So I see children as competent. I don't see them as vulnerable. So these are bamboo logs. They go up to about 3 meters. These children are 1.5. These bamboo logs are for the after school club uses this space as well. So these were for the 10-year-olds. By chance, these young children suddenly notice these bamboo logs, as children suddenly do not notice things and then suddenly they do. And they started to climb up these bamboo logs. There's no protection at the side and they're having to stand at the top, which is just a ledge of about 0.5 meter wide at a fence. The staff went over, but through their mind, they went, okay, let's just go through the child development of these children. What have we taught them? Are they safe? Okay, these children have been taught and they've experienced looking after each other. They've got the physical strength to climb because they've done so much activity day in, day out, outside. So they've got the social skills to support each other. They've got the emotional skills not to be silly because they've been taught not to be, and they've got the physical skills. So the staff stayed close by, but they didn't intervene. And they did climb to the top, and nobody fell down. And it's that kind of thinking that one needs to go through when one's working with children. You know, have I taught them the skills to be able to do this? Would I let a bunch of 1.5-year-olds that I know nothing about in a situation like this? No, of course I wouldn't, because I don't know them. That's not what I'm suggesting, but they are capable because these staff saw them as competent and taught them skills. Children with severe autism cannot have access to outside. It's too dangerous. They can't cope with change and sudden happenings. There's so many things that we box children with. So this is a PhD student that I've been working with children who've got severe and moderate autism. They're 17, 16. Big project to do with going outside. These children were fine. They could cope with change. They could cope with the bee suddenly coming in front of them. They could cope with the cow swishing their tail. And their challenging behaviour really minimised outside, and the staff child ratio dropped when they were working outside. So yes, all children can work outside. So kind of coming back to the fundamentals, outdoor is a place of playful education and learning. So what do you need to do? So getting it right, you have to, the first book I ever wrote was about the organisation and management of outdoors, and I still stand by that. If you get that wrong, you can have the greatest idea in the world, it will not work. So you have to have the resources, first of all, that fit with what you're trying to teach children. And again, all of this I will illustrate through pictures. Remember, just because it's always been, it doesn't have to be. Again, I'll illustrate this. Create an environment that's intentional. So you want to intentionally teach children, and yes, we teach children outside, because sometimes we get into this thing, oh, it's just a learning play environment, so I don't need to do anything. You really do need to do things. From intentional teaching comes intentional learning. I would only have loose parts that are multi-purpose. Teach children the skills they need, as I've illustrated with going up the bamboo logs. And don't assume small pupils are stupid and need lots of primary colour toys. They really don't. Plain wood is just fine and very inclusive. And then another possibility, or a kind of getting it right, create equipment boxes and versatile equipment rather than single toys, as in ride-ons. So let's have a look at some images. Okay, so these are loose parts. These are hay bales. Get them from a garden centre somewhere like that. But this setting, and yes, I work in settings which are small and large and got green stuff and nature, and some that don't, and some that are north facing and are generally pretty awful. So I know the range of experiences that people may have. This setting, it's just hay, straw bales, it's logs, it's twigs, it's felled tree. They had a felled tree, which the small people decided was a dragon. There's grass, there's shrubs, there's trees. That was it. Think about resources. So these are tyres. What is it these children actually need at this age? So these 1.5-year-olds on the left, those tyres aren't really relevant to them, definitely not for jumping from and into, as those 5-year-olds are doing on the right, but they are terribly important for learning to step, because stepping up and stepping down and climbing up and climbing down is a terribly important physical skill that young children need. So really have a look at resources and think, well, what's right for the age? What am I actually trying to teach them? Children on the right in a primary school, and the child is trying to see whether she can fit in that tub. And it's about understanding your own space and size, and facing anxiety and uncertainty. And I'll tell you about the research to do with that in a minute. And it's not a case of having to do things. It's a case of trying them out, or actually going, do you know what? I don't want to do that. This is a mechanic's pit, or it's 3 chairs, 2 crates, a pram, 2 ramps, 3 planks and 2 blocks. But for these children in this situation, it's a mechanic's pit. They don't need us to make a mechanic's pit for them. They don't need us to create roads on the ground. They can create roads with chalk or water. So do less, but have resources that can be literally anything. My favourite only fixed piece of equipment is a hill. It is the most useful and versatile piece of equipment. And these young children, they learn so much on that hill. Just the physical skill of having to climb up and down. And it's steep. When I first came to that hill, I went, okay, I might just go on all 4s. They also did a lot of work on helping each other up and down, so emotional, social development. And then there was all the geography about seeing into the distance and understanding, location and geography, that sort of thing. I said, you don't, just because you've always done it, you don't always have to. We have easels, don't we? And we have sand trays and we have water trays. Well, do we need to have all of those things? Maybe not. I don't know that you do. I think a big butt outside full of water and lots of containers for moving that water is all that you need. But here is, tubing and washing up bowls and some big containers of washing up liquid ware, which have been cut to create funnels. Now, that was created by older children for the younger children. So that was a nice emotional, social skill for the older children. But you could easily create these situations with children yourself. So that's just an idea of, you don't necessarily need water in, water out, sand in, sand out, easel in, easel out. Put resources and skills where they're best placed. Create an intentional environment. So this is really thinking again, what's the child development needs of my children, and then of my children particularly. I don't know your children's needs, and children across the world have different needs. But look at this child, so that there's a hill. It's for physical skill, but look at that young child trying to help the other child up the hill. So it's an intentional teaching environment, it's an intentional learning environment. So back to those children with that water and that water butt. It's not a particularly pretty area that they've got. They made the best of it that they could. So 2 children under 2 helping each other carry water. That is a real skill to carry water like that. And especially when you're 1.5, and that container is heavy. So it's strengthening muscles, it's strengthening bones, it's helping with heart-lung exercise. And then there's all the cooperation. You don't need to worry about the mess, because if the water goes over, it's okay, it's on the grass, it's just going to create a bit of mud, it's fine. So older children are going to need a different You know, they're going to need more complicated science experiments to do with water. So as it says, have resources that fit with what you're trying to teach the children. As I've said, just remember, just because it's always been, it doesn't have to be. You know, there is no water tray in sight. Think about, you know, create this intentional environment. The schema is transporting. Okay, so that fits with young children under 2, particularly. I mean, it fits with children under 5. How do I make this happen for these children? Okay, I just ask the parents for a load of different containers. I beg, borrow, and not steal equipment. And you know, they were very lucky. Portugal's very keen on sustainability, so they do have a big butt to collect all the rainwater. These are loose parts. There's no fixed equipment involved in this, because it could be that container they're carrying there might become something else. Instead of carrying water, it carries something else, or it could become a bath for a doll. I've got no idea. It could become a hat. So it's multi-purpose. Think back to Dyson, you know, and that kind of idea of being inventive. Teach the skills children need. So, you know, thinking of them going up those bamboo logs. You know, if you're going to be able to enable children to do that, then you've got to teach them to get on with each other. You've got to help them have confidence in themselves. You've got to teach them physical strength. So what do you do and why? Go out, whatever the weather. Children need to experience poor weather and overcoming it. I'm not suggesting, you know, like the gales that we had recently. Not in a month of Sundays would I suggest that. But as long as you've got the right kit, you should generally be able to go out most of the time. But there is no point in having a water tray. So you're kitted out in waterproof clothing. Then you have a water tray. Then you have gloves on the end of your piece of elastic. And then you dip your hands in the water tray. And then you've got wet gloves. Absolutely pointless. So, you know, again, think, what are the resources that really suit these children's development? Children have to have experience of light, the fresh air, to be healthy. I think the pandemic has absolutely proven that. And people like Professor Semple, who's in the SAGE group, you know, has said children, well, all of us need fresh air. Children do need to come into contact with flora and fauna, and they need to know what is safe and what not to be afraid of, and to become amazed and awestruck. I mean, the colours in nature are quite extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. You do not need to discuss colour with a paint palette. You just go outside and discuss colour. Children need to appreciate the beauty of outside, and even in urban areas, there is beauty. Just some evidence from you know, strong pieces of research. So young children, what are their 2 main aims? Well, when a baby's born, there's 2 main things they want to do: shift, so move, and communicate. Those are the basic drivers of young children. So outdoors is absolutely perfect for this, yeah, to enable them to move. And what a wonderful place to create language. So if you look at Lee, big piece of research from 2011, so the size of the vocab of a child indicates their future trajectory. So by the age of 2, the size of their vocabulary, how many words they've got, will dictate how well they do in their future. It's that simple. Physical development, Gallagher demonstrates that by age 7, children need all the fundamental stages of physical development in place. We've got a big job to do to get them up to that stage. There's a lot to do. And his book is fabulous for just indicating what all of the aspects of physical development that are needed. Two researchers from our institute are looking at adventurous play and anxiety. And what they're starting to suggest, adventurous play provides protective factors, so as children or adults face uncertainty or anxious situations, they know how to deal with them. So that child who was going to jump into that container is slightly edgy, or, you know, can I, can't I, what might happen? She jumps, she's okay. She might not another time, she might fall. I'm not asking for children to get really badly hurt. I'm not saying that. But sometimes children will fall over, and that's where it's really working with parents to make them understand that. But what the evidence is coming through now is if you allow children to have those adventurous experiences, when they get to be an adult and they're facing uncertainty or anxious situations, their brain knows how to deal with it. I've been here before. I've been in an anxious situation. Yeah, you know, I'm okay. I can deal with it. And then some of my work, you know, some children are much more comfortable outside and so achieve. Some children just can shine outside, much more so than in the confines of the classroom. So there's some, you know, a little bit of evidence about, you know, how it all fits with child development. Perfect example, you know, it's not a ride on. It is, but it's a combined ride on. And children are talking, they are moving, they are active, and they're sharing. I'm nearly there. There's some reading. A couple of courses that I've created on Future Learn. They're all free. If you were interested in communication or how children learn, or your own values about children being competent or not, or about outdoor ed, there's two courses, one for primary, one for secondary, that might be of interest for you. We've just started this one about teaching climate and sustainability in primary schools, but from an outdoor perspective, but it goes from 4 to 11. And do you know what? The head teacher goes on about the importance of early years. Yay. There's my contact. And I'm just going to finish. Bananarama was my time. Some of you may not know this band, but one of their songs was, "It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results." So here is a walnut in a shell. So this is kind of my metaphor for a child, okay? Child is inside. Now you can whack it with a hammer, you know, and a lot of education, I think, does that. And you get the walnut out, great. It's a bit crumpled. Or you can use a nutcracker and you can ease the walnut out and you get fully formed, rounded children. And I'm just, my sort of my work is about making education as easy for children as possible. So here we are, children, 1.5, eating soup. They weren't given that soup, you know, one day and expected to eat it. It's a regular thing. So they can. Look at the way they're holding their spoons. Look at the way they're concentrating on what they're doing. They're 1.5. So given the right environment, yes, children are capable and become very confident. And I would say that's through outdoor education. And I've stopped.
And I think, Helen, that's my cue. So my job, good evening, everybody. My job over the next few minutes is to respond to Helen's absolutely fantastic. I was supposed to be taking notes for myself as prompts, but I got really caught up in those just absolutely marvelous photographs of children and the stories that your photographs tell of these capable children and the way, the affordance of those environments. And what struck me is you've talked the talk, but you clearly are walking the walk as well, because those environments have all of those open-ended, non-specific, almost non-bought but sourced range of, I'm not even sure what to call them, but affordance was the word that kept cropping up. So anyway, I have been warned. I have a time limit, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk through some of the themes that resonated with me. And I suppose I would say that my backdrop for this is, as Liz said earlier, we are updating ASHTR, the early childhood curriculum framework, and we're currently carrying out a consultation. It may well be that some of you who are participating, who are attending this evening, were at the focus group that we had earlier this evening for people who work with, for practitioners who work with children from birth to 3. And what I think we can see, Helen, and I think our attendance this evening tells us that, what we're hearing from all of the people that we're connecting with in the sector through our consultation is that the work that you have presented to us this evening is something that we feel very strongly in Ireland, whose moment has come. And I suppose we would have to acknowledge as well that perhaps the experience of the last 2 years has really contributed to accelerating our interest. The other thing that really strikes me in the way that your work resonates with us is our focus on well-being and our very heightened awareness of well-being. Now, ASHTR, our early childhood framework, was a real groundbreaker back in 2009 because one of its themes is well-being. We are also in the middle of redeveloping our primary school curriculum. And one of our proposals is that there will be a curriculum area entitled well-being. And we know that for our lower secondary, our junior cycle, that we also, it's quite new, that framework from 2015, and well-being features. And I think one of the things that's so persuasive in your material is just how convincing, utterly convincing it is, the contribution that being outdoors, particular outdoor play, makes to children's well-being. And the other thing that really struck me about is the age groups. You took us through, and clearly your work from children who are just about, on their feet and toddling, right up to older teenagers. This resonates, I think, here in Ireland, because one of the things that we are very consciously trying to do in our curriculum, our curricular frameworks, is to build in that sense of continuity and progression for children. These are the same children. So those little 1.5-year-olds that you introduced us to, they are the 18-year-olds just a bit further down the line. And I think you have really demonstrated to us the connectivity and the contribution into the life course of an individual, the contribution to well-being, to progression, that these kind of experiences can have. That really stood out for me. The other thing, and everybody who's listening here who knows ASHTR knows that at the heart of ASHTR, we have always tried to emphasize the children as competent and capable. And I think your pictures, it just illustrated that. So I'm not actually going to go into that any further, but to say that this is utterly consistent with what we are trying to achieve through ASHTR, and which all of these practitioners who are working with ASHTR and using it, this is something that we hold in common, and we hold it very dear, that this is our image of the child. I'm going to finish up by asking you, and I'm going to cheat completely because I know we're going to do questions later, because I actually want to finish here with 2 questions. One of the pieces that you talked about, adventurous play. Now, I did get a little bit, my heart did stop slightly, I suppose, when the 1.5-year-olds climbing the bamboo. one of the things the NCCA, we manage the Asher Shield to Practice Guide, which is a support for practitioners. And one of the pieces of work that we progressed over the last couple of years, it took a bit of time, it was around what we have termed risky play. But I think that what you have described and the way that you've talked about adventurous play, and I'm really interested to know in working with practitioners and with adults, we adults are terrible aware of the risk. And if you have an experience of how we can be helped as adults to deal with that level of risk. And the other question, and particularly around parents there, I think would be the other one. And the other theme that really stands out for us, because this is something we are also trying to build into our curriculum, is how the environment facilitates children's agency. You know, we talk about open-ended materials, but about the decision-making and children's independence and capacity for decision-making, and how this kind of outdoor play can facilitate child agency in their own lives. So I think I'm just under time, and maybe we might be able to, you know, address those issues in the questions. Thank you very much. This is just wonderful work. It is so it's energizing. It's energizing. That's what it is.
Good.
So thank you very much, Helen. That was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, I just love it myself. So I've got 3 things to deal with. Risk. First of all, one of the things I said, but I didn't sort of go on. We use the wrong language. Why use the word risk with parents? I mean, if somebody said to me, "Oh, I want to give your child risky play," I think, you know, and I knew nothing, I'd go, "What? You know, risky is dangerous." So use different language. Use challenging play. Use adventurous play. Just take it out of the frame. So I think that's, you know, one of, you know, and the sustainability course that we've just created, again, there's a lot of language around that. There's very negative. People go, you hear weather forecast, people going, "Oh, you've got a good day today, it's lovely and sunny," or "It's a dreadful day out there, it's raining." Of course, children are going to pick up, "Oh, okay, when it's raining, I've got to be miserable, and when it's sunny, I've got to be happy." Language to me is fundamental to everything that we do. So I think one way of getting around that is just to use different language. So that in terms of parents, I think you have to work. Parents are the people you need to persuade. So for example, the Portugal project that we did, it took 4 months to persuade parents that we were not going to kill their children taking them outside. And the hotter the country, the more protective it seems that the parents are. So Portugal, Italy, Spain, they very wrap them up with cotton wool. Denmark, Iceland, Norway, you know, they let children go out and it's freezing. So I think with parents, you've got to acknowledge their fears, understand their fears, hear their fears, explain what you're doing, and you have to be articulate, I think, in what you're trying to achieve. I think that's terribly important. So you can properly explain, maybe, you know, talking about Lee or Gallagher or Dodds and Leicester or my work, and say, okay, you know, let's look at some really strong evidence. I'm trying to help your child. Agency, I think you go back. I mean, I always say, right, my children that I work with, I want them to be inventors and designers and architects and engineers, people who create. These people who are 1.5 are the next generation of engineers, inventors, designers, creators. So when you look at them like that, I think you give them agency, so that, and you think, right, this is, you know, the next Dyson. What does the next Dyson need to be able to create? I don't know what the next creation is going to be, but, you know, how do I help them? And it isn't, to my mind, you know, having Lego out on a Monday and Duplo out on a Tuesday, and, you know, I don't know, like people put things like the dinosaurs in the water on Monday and then, I don't know, the Lego on Tuesday. That doesn't enable children to use their imagination and say, I want to create X, Y, and Z, and I actually need an empty water tray, I need Duplo, I need some wooden blocks, I need some carpet tiles. So I think, yes, I'm trying to be ever so quick because I'm terribly acutely aware of the time. So I think that's, that the kind of idea of loose parts, I think, helps create that idea of giving children agency. Sorry if I've gone on a bit.
No, you have not. Thank you both for wonderful presentations there, wonderful response. Helen, we have a few questions here that I'd just like to put to you. They do actually relate very closely to the issue of risky play or adventurous play.
Okay.
And that's a discussion that we're very interested in early childhood Ireland as well, and how we change the language there and how we change the story, I suppose. So the questions, sorry, I've just slightly gone, here we go. Yeah, somebody's looking here. There's one question on how to, excuse me now. Yeah, first question is on how the advice on this, this is a kind of a practice issue, advice on the logistics of putting on and off waterproofs for children. So you might have 22 children in one group. And also, how to manage wearing wet gear into the setting and then managing moving outdoors. So I suppose there are practical issues there, if you have any advice from your experience.
Sure. I mean, whether you've got the 1.5-year-olds or in fact they start, when we did the project, they were 14 months. I mean, they're kind of 3 months off having, and some of them were only just on their pins. All you're going to do, well, first of all, there's this 4 months of explaining to parents and listening to them, and that we're not going to kill them by taking them outside. So that was the first bit. I think my belief is a talk like this can be overwhelming because there's so much information. So my advice would be to just think, okay, what would I, what do one thing well is always my mantra. Don't try to do everything. But in terms of something like that, and stuff takes a long time. You can't suddenly go out tomorrow and go, whoopee, I can be like Helen's photographs. So, be nice to yourself. 4 months with parents, and then all that we ended up doing was putting clothes on children, kind of spending about 3 minutes outside and coming back in. Well, it's a bit like when you first take a group of children into the hall to do PE. All you spend your time on is children learning how to get wretched tights on or whatever, but teach the skills the children need to know. That's one of the things I said. So we want to work outside. They're very young. The first thing they're going to need to do is be interested in the outside. So when you get out there, make sure it is interesting. But they are going to need to be taught the skills, and these children learn fast. I want to be out there, so I'm going to put this suit on fast. I don't need anybody to help me. But I think you just have to be patient. That's the first skill you need to do, and I've forgotten what else did you ask, Liz?
Yeah, I think that answers that very, very well. And there was another question put in actually before some of your last slides, which was about finding evidence about, the need for this kind of adventurous play as a counterbalance to issues that might arise during regulatory inspection of settings, where there might be some of the greenery might be nettles, or it might be something that might be seen as being undesirable. So, I suppose, so I think you have given some really good evidence there. And that desire is supposed to get rid of everything that's seen as potentially dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, something like stinging nettles, they're not nice if you get stung. They're not. But you do learn. And if we're going to, if we're really going to, so one of the things in the climate course that we've done, we need stinging nettles. They're very important for certain, animals. So let's, rather than go, okay, let's just pull them all up. Children, somebody might get stung, but they're not going to die. and they will remember this. And I'll give you an instance. In the school in Oxford, it was just a tiny bit of wood, really, and every class had access to it. And one child, she'd been, so again, teach the skills they need to know. There was behaviours you had to know when you were around the pond. I mean, the pond had about, 12 centimetres of water in it. And there were the particular, this is the way you're going to behave around the pond. And I'm not saying there's no rules. I've woodworked with children. There are very strong rules with woodwork. You don't play the game of woodwork and my rules, well, then you're not going to use this equipment. Same with things like the pond. Well, the child didn't of 36 months. She didn't play the rules. She fell in. She got terribly wet and terribly upset. We'd already risk assessed the area, so we knew that if any, you work through and think, okay, let's just work through. Somebody could fall here. This could happen over there. Okay, there were enough adults around to just pull her out, take her inside. She was cracking after that. Anybody went near the pond, she'd go, you need to sit down. You need to be on your knees. You shouldn't walk because you might fall in, and it's not like a bath. It's really not pleasant. And she was our great advocate for playing the game, the rules of the pond. Yes, she got wet, but she was okay.
Great. I think maybe there's just time for just one more very quick question, Niamh. And it's the bamboo logs have really, people are saying, a lot of us are looking at they're still thinking about the bamboo logs. And I suppose the comment is that the capabilities of children are very varied in relation to their physical capabilities and their safety awareness, etc. So I suppose in terms of being aware and risk assessing, do you encourage all children to take risks? How do you manage risk in a group situation where children's capabilities are quite different from each other?
Interesting question. Something like I think most children, there's only a few children who are dangerous, who have no sense of danger. It is a natural inclination. So hold on to that. Yes, there are some children who don't. And probably leave those to one side. Things, if you've got loose parts, if you've got equipment that's kind of can be accessible by anybody, the hill, for example, is much safer than some silly climbing frame that's made of plastic that often isn't for the age range that it should be. That is actually far more dangerous. And those silly bubble cars, are so dangerous for children's feet. So something like the hill got very different capabilities. Sure, a child, when I was there working with those children, the children who were not sure didn't go up the hill. They did other things, yeah? The children who didn't want to go up the bamboo didn't go up the bamboo. You had to be really strong to pull yourself up there. But I am absolutely at pains to say that didn't happen on day one, going up that bamboo. And it was important for us to put in the book the thinking through of the staff in terms of do we, don't we? Now they also took the children to a river. Now at that point they went, we don't feel this is safe. We've got 14 children with us, 3 adults. This doesn't feel safe. So they shifted back. But that's about the staff being confident, making sure they've really carefully risk assessed situations. And in some ways, yes, knowing the capabilities, there was a range of capabilities of those children climbing up bamboo, but the ones that weren't capable didn't climb up. By the river, there was, nobody could swim is a starting point. Yeah, some were probably going to be more capable if they did fall in, but the risk was that was a risk. That wasn't adventurous play or challenging play. That was dangerous. So I think I think people think I'm suggesting do this tomorrow. Please don't. You're putting children in severe danger. I'm not sure that answered it.
No, it did. Unfortunately, I'm afraid we've many more questions, which we will take away in Early Childhood Ireland to think about in terms of our own resources and kind of supports that we'll provide as well. And just to remind people that are asking questions, yes, we will be sending out a recording to anybody who has attended or anybody who's registered basically for today, for this evening session. So there will be a recording. So I'm going to hand over to Niamh Fortune, Professor Niamh Fortune from Maynooth University's Froebel Department, to see us out for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Helen and Jacqueline. What a wonderful hour. It has flown by. I'd say we probably could stay for another hour and listen to all of this wonderful discussion, Helen. A couple of takeaways before we finish. I think what's really going to stick with me and really resonates with me, children are capable. Trust children. They're not vulnerable, they're very capable. And I think that might help us with this question around kind of helping parents, educators to deal with that risk. Trust children. I think the second part that you mentioned, Helen, you're staying close by. So as a parent, as an early childhood educator, a primary school teacher, you're staying close by. You're not intervening, but you know that the children have the skills that you've taught. And I think that really, kind of gives the confidence that you spoke about with your early years education, that gives the confidence that I have taught those skills. And talking about those skills, I just picked up on a few. I mean, I think we've such an appetite for this in Ireland. Froebel, very much in line with what we're all about in Froebel. And as Jacqueline spoke about Ashter, we've such an appetite for this. And, the skills that we're developing will help maybe explain, not that we want to have to explain that, why we're doing this. Like you spoke about the emotional skills, the social skills, the physical skills, that idea of risk assessment, which we know is so important later in life, the confidence, and even the language development. I mean, how many skills is that? And the whole idea of that adventurous play, the protective factors for anxiety later on, which is so important. And I think, we can't even measure that. So, Helen, thank you so much. I really could stay for another hour and listen to you, but thank you for your time. And so, big thank you to Early Childhood Ireland, who we have a very close relationship with and we cherish. And thank you to the Froebel Department Research Committee, to Liz, and to everybody involved in tonight's, and all the participants, the hundreds of participants that have joined us. And we look forward to the next one, Helen, and we look forward to talking to you really soon. Thank you.
Thank you.